Well, yesterday we broke the news of over 100 students kidnapped from a school in Nigeria's Kaduna state. It is the latest in a wave of violence in that region that has become known for kidnapping for ransom. There have been 2 kidnappings involving children in less than 24 hours in Kaduna. At least 8 people, including a 1-year-old child, were taken by armed men from a hospital in the town of Zaria. Hours later, a school was targeted by kidnappers who took more than 100 students with them into a nearby forest. Since December, look at this figure, more than 1,000 students have been kidnapped from schools and universities in the north of the country. 9 of them have been killed, more than 300 are still missing. Our Nigeria correspondent, Maini Jones, has more.
It's incredible that we've seen 2 kidnappings in the same state in northern Nigeria in just 24 hours. They've been taken, as far as we know, to a nearby forest hideout. That's usually where kidnappers in the region tend to take their victims after they've abducted them, and they usually tend to hold on to them until a ransom is paid. Now, over the last 7 months, that period of time has ranged from 6 days to 2 months, and we've spoken to a number of kidnapping victims who describe really terrible conditions in these forest hideouts, having to sleep on the floor, barely having anything to eat or drink, and just being generally exhausted and terrified. And as well, in other parts of the country, we often report kidnappings involving children because it's such an emotive issue for most people, but the reality is kidnapping is a daily reality for many Nigerians. Whether you're traveling from one city to another, or even if you're in your home, many are now aware of the fact that they could be taken at any point by armed men, and pressure is increasing on President Buhari. People want to see a more concentrated effort on the part of the president. At the moment, northern governors have been trying to tackle the issue in various ways, either by negotiating with the kidnappers or by refusing to do so altogether. But many are criticizing the lack of central planning and organization to tackle this kidnapping crisis.
So let's talk more specifically about what can be done to try and stop these abductions, and join Tamwa Ashiru, who is a security consultant for Bullock Intelligence in Nigeria, joining us now from Lagos. Tamwa, we're just hearing that vulnerable schools in Kaduna State have now shut to prevent further kidnappings. To start with, surely that is not the solution.
No, absolutely not. You're very correct. Now, there is no clear sort of easy solution that the government or security infrastructure can use. It's such a tricky situation. First and foremost, we have to look at what keeps spurring these attacks and these kidnappings. One of it has to do with just the vast amount of land, just ungoverned spaces that exist. Also, a lot of their targets, a lot of these schools, a lot of the communities and places or institutions that are targeted are located in areas that cannot really be easily reached at any point in time. We've seen a couple of tactics, too, of these criminal groups trying to neutralize any form of emergency response or any kind of response that the victims might get. So, for example, they may target the army bases nearby or checkpoints. They may target some of the police locations nearby first, so to make sure that the police or whoever, the nearest law enforcement, won't actually be able to reach these schools in response. So it's a very dicey situation.
Absolutely, Tamwa. And let's talk about the security forces and the police. They're clearly overwhelmed by the scale of all of this, but are they well enough resourced? Are they sharing intelligence in the right way? What's happening inside these forces that mean that they can't cope with what's happening?
Well, one of the major issues is that they do have the technology to be able to track down the kidnappers, to track down the locations of where the victims are being kept. But oftentimes the what is the most important thing for them is to ensure that the victims don't die in captivity. So oftentimes it's very important that first and foremost, the victims get rescued or released, and then they go after the kidnappers. We have seen, though, in recent times, the law enforcement just going ahead and going forward with rescue operations, which can be very, very tricky because it could lead to if anything goes wrong, it could lead to the death of some of the victims that you're trying to indeed rescue. They do have intelligence about these people, the criminal groups, the gangs that are involved. And that is, I think, what baffles most Nigerians. We're saying we know you have the technology and the capability to track down these people, these criminals, and neutralize them. But why are you not doing it? And I think that's the key question that's still on everyone's minds right now.
And we're just seeing parents obviously distraught. 300 school children still missing, we understand. What are your thoughts, Tamara, on this bill that is looking to criminalize the paying of ransom?
You know, it's actually very insensitive. Usually when you hear about countries or groups that say they're not going to pay any ransom, that's usually because they have the right security and intelligence architecture to be able to put together a rescue operation that would successfully gain the release of the victims and take out the bad guys, so to speak. But when you haven't put this infrastructure in place, you haven't put mechanisms in place to actually protect the victims, protect the schools, and yet you're going to come out right and say, we're just not going to negotiate. In essence, what you're telling those parents is your children are just going to have to be scapegoats, and that cannot go down well with any parent whatsoever. So at the end of the day, these parents will do whatever it is that they can. They will pay whatever amount that they need to get their loved ones out.
Absolutely.
And it's up to the government to play their part.
And you completely can understand that. Tamara Shuru, very good to hear from you. Thanks for joining us from Lagos.